Welcome back to the channel of truth, trust, and transparency. Today, I'm answering another one of your questions. And to be honest, guys, this is my favorite form of video, especially you have a question around property investing or development, and you just want my 10 cents. Obviously, it's not financial advice, but you just want to know my level of thinking and how I would approach it. Always just hit me up with a question, inbox, DM on Instagram is probably where you're going to get the best response. This come through a comment box. This come through a question box that I put on the Everything Property page. However, it's applicable to development, so I thought I'd bring it across to here and I'd address a bit of a video on it because I think it's going to be great value with you guys as well. I've done plenty of this, so if you're finding value on any of these answers, would appreciate if you hit subscribe. As always, trying to get to 2,500 by the end of the year. But this is the question. The question comes in and says, I said, what do you want to hear more of or videos on? And this particular guy said, feasibility. Do you still go ahead with deals that don't make sense in the next 2 years or so? Now, I had a couple of people reach out, and one thing that I will say is, especially with development, I know it's sexy, you know what everyone goes to make money, but this is why I always say the more expensive the development, the better. Because a simple scenario, and people say, oh, look, I want to get into those cheaper areas and let's say you do a development and you make 150 grand, right? And that takes you 2 years. You've worked at that project, you've made 75 grand per year. To me, project that size isn't worth my time, but on the other hand as well, you have to remember, if you've got a property portfolio of 3 properties at 600 grand each, you've got a $1.8 million property portfolio. Now, if this portfolio grows at 7%, you're going to make $126,000 in equity growth on your portfolio in 12 months. Now, albeit equity isn't the same as cash, and you would need to make substantially more, think about selling down and that kind of stuff. But for me, if it's a project that is making such small money and I can make that in equity without having to sell, develop, or do anything, a lot of you guys are better off just holding a portfolio. It's only when you get into developments more expensive, for example, 450 across 2 years, meaning I've made 225 grand a year, is where I go, hey, that makes sense. 450 grand as well. I know when I take that into my portfolio, that's paying off the debt on one of these properties, and I only need to do that 3 times. So before you begin and dive into it, you need to think about the money that your portfolio would make if you weren't to develop for 12, 18 months versus the money you will make in a development. The development is good because it is cash, but if it's those smaller amounts, sometimes it's not worth your time and effort, especially if it was like in that first example, you're only getting 75 grand per year. Me personally, I aim for about 200 grand per year, absolute minimum. So if it's a 2-year project, it blows out to a 2-year project, and I've made 400 grand, I'd be happy with that because I know I can run a couple of those projects, and it's pretty easy. If you're running 4 or 5, that's how you can make, your $1 million per year by doing a couple of those at the same time. But something to consider first and foremost, and I'll make a note of these so the person that's asked this question can sort of go back and calculate these. But one is going to be portfolio growth versus development profit. So that's the first thing you're going to have to think about and run the numbers on. I don't know your portfolio. I don't know how many properties you have. I don't know where they're located. I don't know what the chances are of that being a 7% growth rate, but something to definitely consider. The next thing you need to think about, and all developers are always continually thinking about, or the experienced one, is number 2, the velocity of money. What do I mean by that? It's getting the best amount or best return for your money in as quick as possible. Now, what this looks like, if I've got 500K to spend, And it's funny because this conversation actually came up last night when I was in the office running through a few scenarios. Now, if I've got 500K to spend and I'm going to do a DA, CC, construction, all that kind of stuff, project one, or I've got project two. This is a real situation. So if I've got to go through the same situation, right? CC, construction. Classic example, velocity of money means that for a development, what is the return and how long does it take me to get that? Is this going to be a 12-month project that I can make 300-400 grand from? Or is this a project that is going to take 2 years that I can make $1 million from? So situation I'm looking at now, right? There's a couple of sites. One I know is a larger site that's got profit of about $1.9 million. Now, I will probably likely need double that amount, $1 million, to get into that project. Or there's projects that I know I can use the 500 for and make 500 grand. Now, the timing of these two projects is going to be about 18 months for both of them. What you'll learn and what you need to start to understand when you're a developer is the velocity of your money. Where can I spend my money and get the best return? Because if I look at here, I'm getting 100% cash on 100% return profit on the money that I've invested over an 18-month time frame, which is actually pretty decent. Here, I might need to bring in someone else or lend the money and do a project twice as big in the same time. However, I'm not making double the amount of money. I'm making close to 4 times the amount of the project in the same time frame. I need to borrow a little bit more, but velocity of money in this picture, I go, this project here is a better option for me. Why? I've got more margin. I've got more at stake, of course, but for me, I want to be able to spend my money, get the best return on it in the shortest time frame. For me, it's going to be here, this money here, $1.9 million worth of profit. Even if I've got to half that down, I'm still making in a 12-month time frame, roughly about double in the same time frame of that project. So you need to think about, and the second thing you need to think about is velocity of your money. The third thing, plan and strategy. If you want to be a developer, and to lead this back into the question, if you want to be a property developer and be developing, if you're telling me that that project doesn't make sense in the next 2 years and you need to hold on to the project for 2 years to then start the project, build the project, finish the project, that's a 3.5 to 4 year project timeline, which is incredibly long. That's not a very good use in the velocity and the spend of your money. But it does come down to what is the plan and the strategy? Because a lot of us could be going, okay, if the plan is I build out a property portfolio and one of the properties that I know is located, it's developable, it was located in the right suburb, it's a bit of a larger block. I know that's a play in 5 years' time or 10 years' time when I've got the equity, I can put a second dwelling on there and get rental income. It depends on the plan and the strategy, but if you want to go out there and be a developer and develop properties and scale and go into the next and the next, you want to get in and out as quickly as possible, recycle your money, get the profits and lead into the next property, the next property, the next property. If it doesn't make sense in 2 years' time, in the next 2 years, then for me, it's a little bit of a red flag. I would never, ever, ever, being a developer, if it doesn't make sense today, I would never acquire it because you're relying on the market to do something over what if you get to 2 years and the market hasn't grown to where you need it to go? Are you going to go back again and say, oh, you know what, I'm going to have to wait 3, 4, 5 years? Well, then you could have, in a 5-year time frame, you could have done 3, 4, 5 other projects to tie your money up. So that's what I mean in terms of velocity of money. If it's going to take so long, you're better off putting your money elsewhere if you want to be a developer. One thing, and I'll give you this tip, this is how I calculate my feasibilities. Now, Feasibility broken into a couple of stages. You've got the acquisition, you've got the professional fees, stat fees, you've got construction, you've got selling costs, right? When I do my feasibilities nowadays, when I get the and then you've got the gross realization, what you're selling the project for. For me to look into and do a project, I put in all these, what I buy it for, professional fees, stat fees, what I can construct it for, GST, and what I sell it for. When I do that, I always, because I'm super conservative, the selling price, I always look on market and I always say, okay, what is selling now in this day and age on market, what I'm building? You need to be able to have 2, 3, 4 at least instances of that finished product now in today's dollars. I always use the finished product in today's dollars and put it in my feasibility. That way, because obviously we're doing the data, we're doing the research on that particular market, supply and demand, I know in 18 months' time, when I finish the property, the market has went up and I'm getting the difference between there and there on my GRs. So for example, if I'm doing townhouses and there's 3 or 4 townhouses that are finished at a sales price of $1 million, I can go to them and say, I can plug $1 million in my FISO, I run the numbers. Now, if it stacks up and works, I go, cool, great, and I know there's a bit of cream on top. But if I put in the numbers of the FISO, buy, acquisition, develop, build at the current rates, where the current market is, let's just say the market stays still and it doesn't stack up, I wouldn't then proceed into that deal and then hope for the market to rise. The market increase that you get is the cream of the crop on top, not that you need to rely on, because otherwise you run the risk of doing an 18, 24-month development and there being no profit at the end. So you need to make sure that that project makes sense on today's dollars, the market dollars, and then you get that uplift because of the type of market that you're investing in, you've done your research, supply and demand, all those sorts of things. The increase in sales price, for example, it might be 3 townhouses. If they're $1 million now, the deal works, returns 15, 20%, great. Because I know that the market might be moving at a rate where they're worth 1.1 when I finish. Across 3, that's an extra $300,000. That pushes the project into the green. Perfect. But if it doesn't work on today's dollars and you reckon you have to wait 2 years, I would not do that particular deal. For me personally, if I'm going to develop. The only way something like that makes sense if it's part of your portfolio and the goal is in couple 5, 6, 8, 10 years time, when you've got equity, you've maybe paid down some debt, you've got the cash, then you're putting the second dwelling on to do something like, or second or third dwelling, something like that for cash flow play. But if you want to be a developer, you need to consider where your current portfolio is, what it's growing at, and the type of project you want to do and the profit. Because again, if my portfolio is doing 150, 200 grand a year in growth, then it doesn't make sense personally if you're doing a development and you're making, maybe 100 grand in profit. That's why you need to go to those development sites and those areas where you can start making 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, $1 million, because that also makes sense in terms of a pay down the debt on portfolio. The next thing you want to think about is the velocity of money. Is that particular project, if I wait 2 years and the GRs aren't there for me to sell it, and I've got to wait another 2 years, consider the cost of your money, the interest costs, the holding costs, land rates, council rates, all those sorts of things. Could I have went into another deal and done 2 or 3 of those in that time and made 200-300 a deal? If I've done 3 of those, I've made $1 million, compared to I'm still waiting on this site for me to make any sort of money. That's where it comes down to planning and strategy. And also when you're preparing your feasibility, my recommendation to you is that you run the feasibility, and on the sell price, you run it on today's numbers, so that if it works on today's numbers and you get that uplift in the market, then you make money. If you don't get that uplift and the market remains flat for the next 2 years, unlikely, but if it does, remains flat for the 2 years, you still make money, right? Another thing as well with that is that when you go to get your valuations, when you have the project, either you're going to buy it or you've acquired it and you're going to get more lending for construction, the value is going to come in, and the value is going to have a look at what are the comps in the market area and say, oh, well, yeah, look, this sold for $1 million, this sold for $1 million, this sold for $1 million. What have they got on the feasibility? Oh, they've got $1 million on the feasibility. That stacks up, tick, pass. But if you go and you've run this project on making, 1.3 on those townhouses, the value goes, well, look, hang on a second. I can only have a look at what's sold on the market recently, and they don't really add on or take into account that position of the market. It's really just on those comp sales at the moment. Maybe you'll get a little bit more, but not too much. So for me, I want to run it on today's numbers. That's what the value is going to use as well, because otherwise, if you've bought that site, you're running it on the higher GRs, say it's 1.3, the banks will only lend you, or private credit will only go up to maybe 70% of costs, and what you'll find there is you've based it all on making 1.3. They'll do it based on 1 million, so they'll lend you less, which means you will have to chip in more money and more cash, which you may not be in a position to do. So always when you're doing your FISO, run it off today's numbers, today's market numbers, so that when you get that value uplift over that project, that's the cream on the crop. That's where you'll make plenty of money. I hope that solved and answered the question. Any questions, thoughts, comments, queries, disagree, let me know in the comments. Let's have a conversation. Happy to help. If you have another question as well, you can ask me in YouTube comments or head over to Davey Hamilton on Instagram and DM me. And I'm happy to put together a video, because I'm doing a video a day till the end of 2025, which is taking a lot of time and effort. And if you've got value from today, I would appreciate it if you subscribed. But always, guys, I will see you tomorrow.